Thank you very much, Mr. Akil. That was indeed interesting and enlightening and really shows, I think you went into a lot of areas looking into Islam and Muslims from a cultural, social, as well in Islamic and state perspectives. So I know a lot of you may have quite a number of questions and probably want to relate to that, to what's happening as well in Malaysia. So we come to the session where you can actually do that. So please go to there's two microphones. Please introduce yourselves and try and keep your question short and sweet so that we can give more time to others also to ask questions. So now I open the floor for the first question. Okay.
Thank you. My name is Chin Huat from Penang Institute. I have a question. I mean, following the logic, how do you see the Ottoman traditions of treating Muslims as jimmies? Thank you. Meaning minorities who live under protection of Islam. Thank you.
Maybe the second question, the gentleman at the back. We'll try and collect like 2 or 3 questions and I'll let Mr. Akil to answer.
Hi, my name is Mazlan Manaf. It's both a comment and a question. Your issue here is liberties and Islamic value, but I think one of the challenges being posed on to Muslims in Malaysia here, I think is the very act of thinking is also seem to be discouraged. You know? I think you have a lot to do here in order to make changes in the Islamic world. In particular, if we can focus in the Malaysian society, in Malaysia today, how would you go about bringing about these changes? Because it appears that the trend, the movement today, is exactly in the opposite direction. Yeah.
Thank you. Maybe one more question? Okay, we'll just go straight.
Well, many thanks for the very wise questions, I must say. Thank you for mentioning the dhimmi system and how it was in the Ottoman Empire. I should actually have mentioned that, but I forgot it. Dhimmi, or protected status, was a status of non-Muslims in the Ottoman Empire, like it was the rest of the Muslim world, until mid-19th century. Until mid-19th century, you could be a Christian or Jew in the Ottoman Empire, you had the right to practice your religion, you could be engaged in trade, but you would not be allowed to take place in the government. The government was exclusively Muslim because it was supremacy of the Muslims. And you had to acknowledge the hierarchical status of Muslims comes first, then comes the Christians. There were Muslims, then came the Orthodox Christians, then came the Armenians, and Jews were at the bottom. Although Jews loved it because they were being tortured and killed in medieval Europe. So it was much more preferable to be under the Ottoman hierarchy and be safe and sound and free, relatively, than being tortured by the Inquisition in Spain, for example. That's why Jews came to the Ottoman Empire. However, in the Reformation period, the Tanzimat period, the Ottoman Empire abolished its status and gave full equality to Jews and Christians with the Edict of 1856. It's called the Islahat, or Reform in English, Edict. They were declared as full citizens, so the Zimmi status was abolished. And there were some Islamic scholars who opposed this. Others justified it, saying that the Zimmi status was a contemporary thing, not dictated directly by the Quran, but it was a fact of history, Islamic history. For example, today there is Islamic scholar Ali Bulac in Turkey, respected Islamic thinker. He has a tafsir and a ma'al, an interpretation of the Quran. He thinks that the original Islamic ideal in the city of Medina was not a hierarchy of Muslims at the top and non-Muslims as secondary, but actually an equality-based how do you say that? An agreement based on equality. In the city of Medina, the Prophet Muhammad founded, there were Jews and Muslims. And the constitution of Medina, that Prophet Muhammad signed, says that to Muslims their religion and to Jews their religion. And all of them will defend the city of Medina if there's an attack from the outside. It doesn't say Muslims are superior. That Muslims are superior idea came during the conquests, which was the norm in the Middle Ages. If you're the conqueror, you put certain rule and you make it. It was the Byzantine and the Sassanid and the universal, rule at the time. And you would be actually a blessed, very tolerant if you decide not to massacre the population or something. That was a great thing, And Islam actually always, Muslim rulers, there has been exceptions, but generally didn't attack local populations and only fought the armies and so on and so forth. So it was much more comparable. But in the 19th century, Ottomans abolished this. And it's very important. This happened under the Caliphate. Jews and Christians became full citizens. It's an interesting story, actually. The Orthodox Patriarch said, now will we be equal with the Jews, who we saw as less, relatively inferior to the Christians. So therefore, in late Ottoman bureaucracy, you have Ottoman Armenians, Jews, or Greeks who became ministers in government, ambassadors, top levels of the bureaucracy. And when the Ottoman Empire was collapsing, it was an empire of all peoples equal. Of course, there was traditionally a Muslim sense of strength, and ultimately it was the caliphate. But in bureaucracy, that whole inequality thing was lifted and became, and it's an important thing that Ottomans abolished the status, because they thought it was historical. It's not an integral part of Islam. It's a historical experience of the Islamic community. As for the second issue, thinking being discouraged, well, that happens everywhere, right? And of course, this is not a problem relating directly to Islam. It's a problem relating to authoritarianism. Thinking is discouraged in communist countries too. Well, a few of them are left, and probably the ones that are left probably will go away soon. But even in the West, you can speak of the manufacturing content, Noam Chomsky type. Like the government still discourage indirectly, but still, I would, prefer the indirect one to the direct discouragement. Here, actually making an Islamic case for freedom of speech would be very helpful to those Muslims who think that you should not think but obey the government. One thing, in Islam, governments are not sacred. Rulers are not sacred. Law is sacred. The ruler should abide by the law, and if he doesn't, you have the right to question the ruler. We see this during the caliphate of Umar, Caliph Umar, the second caliph in Islam, radiallahu anh. He was giving a sermon in a mosque. He said things that sounded misogynist. A woman stood up in the mosque and challenged him and quoted a verse from the Quran, and Caliph Umar listened to her. This was the caliph, the biggest authority in Islam, and like an ordinary Muslim woman could talk to him. As time went by, though, the medieval notions of patriarchal rule, the unreachable ruler, became also ingrained in Islam, and obey the ruler has become the general injunction in Islamic law. One more important story, directly from the time of Prophet Muhammad. During the Battle of Badr, the first battle Muslims had with the pagans of Mecca, who had attacked Muslims and persecuted them before the battle. Muslim army would camp at a certain location right before the night of the battle. The day of the battle, it was the night. Prophet Muhammad said, he was the commander of the army, right? Besides being the religious leader. He said, let the army camp in this location. Then what happens is that one name from the Sahaba, his companions, comes and asks the Prophet. He says, oh, dear Prophet of God, is this your opinion or is this a revelation from God? Prophet Muhammad said, it's not revelation, it's my opinion. He says, then I have a different opinion. I think the army should not camp here, but a higher location, which is somewhere there. And the Prophet listens to him and follows his advice, and that helps the Muslim army strategically. Now, this is in our books, and look at the mentality there. They asked the Prophet, if it is not divine, if it is his personal opinion, they can disagree with that opinion. Respectfully, of course, but they can give an alter. Now, in a world where there is no prophet, who is so sacred that we should blindly obey and not think and voice our opinions. Nobody is that way. The caliphs, even caliphs were not that way. They were not divinely ordained. They were just elected by the community, and they became then hereditary monarchies. So no ruler and no scholar in Islam is unchallengeable. They think something, they say their idea. We as ordinary citizens have the right to disagree and say, this is our idea. And this is encouraged in Islam, because nobody has the right to claim undisputable knowledge and opinion. We are all servants of Allah. Nobody is superior than the other. We don't have like Catholicism and a pope which makes no mistakes. The idea of infallibility in Catholicism. And even there, you know, Catholics can sometimes reason with the church and so on and so forth. There's no infallible figure in Islam. We are all servants of God. We are all fallible. So why don't we exchange our ideas? The governments, of course, will try to use everything they have their hand to maximize their power. And religion is such a great tool, they will use religion. And a scholar might say, the blood of the protesters against the government is halal, right? I think somebody said this somewhere around the world. Why? I mean, it's of course unacceptable, and other scholars said that this is. There are protesters and there's a government. Protesters are saying something. They want this, they want democracy, they want whatever. It's an opinion. They're not attacking anybody. They're not committing a crime. They're not violating the law. The law is not about not criticizing the government. The law is about not harming people or property. The 5 principles of Maqasid. So, I mean, one thing is to see that this is not an Islamic problem. This is a universal problem with authoritarian governments. In our part of the world, this sometimes becomes an apparently Islamic problem because Islam is the utmost value. And of course, every ruler wants to solidify his rule by referring to Islamic arguments. In Turkey, there has been some generals who established, who launched a coup against elected governments, and pretty secular generals following the footsteps of Atatürk, Mustafa Kemal, Turkey's secularist founder. They use verses from the Quran to say, obey the ruler. But who are you, ruler? I mean, you're a military coup general. You're not even a legitimately elected ruler. So every government will try to do this, but we should not just give in to that propaganda. And we should not allow our allegiance to our religion to turn into a blind obedience to any earthly authority. That's my message, of course. Of course, not everybody will agree, but I think putting this distinction there as a message strongly might maybe help the situation.
Thank you. Oh, sorry. Thank you very much, Mr. Mustafa. I have no questions, but I just want to make 1 or 2 commentaries. I enjoyed your lecture very much. It saved me the trouble of buying a book to understand Islam. You saved my money. Because, to me, even before buying a book on Islam, I said to myself, it cannot be what I see going on around in the world where, you know, they want this to be done and they want that to be done and they prohibit this and prohibit that. It doesn't make sense. So today, thank you very much for telling me what actually Islam is. But to take a step further, let's talk about religion. I think in the future there will be no religion. Because of religion, people are divided, people fight against each other, etc., etc. And if I were to quote Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, he himself said, within 2,500 years after his death, even Buddhism will disappear from the earth. So, to me, religion has always been trouble, all right? And in the future, I believe, this question of religion A and B and C will be no more. People will be more united. And we are actually now in the age of Aquarius, where the female energy is rising. You see a lot of female leaders, presidents, CEOs, etc. Because the male had been dominant far too long. And according to Taoist belief, the yin and the yang must balance up. So the female energy will be the energy of the future, and I think that religion one day, very soon, in fact, Buddha has already left 2,500 years, so within 20, 30, 50 years, I think everybody will be the same. May I have your opinion here?
Many thanks. Very interesting contribution. I slightly disagree, I think, on a few points. First of all, I think you should buy the book still, you know. Maybe buy 5 of them and give to your friends as well. The other thing is that it's interesting. You're actually referring to a religious teaching to argue that religions will disappear. Could there be a contradiction there, you think? No? Okay. Here's my thing. It is true. I don't think that religions will disappear, and I don't think they should disappear as well. I think there is something inherent in human nature which propels us to believe in something that is beyond ourselves. Some people find the answer in Islam or Christianity or Buddhism or other mysticisms or different Eastern religions, Western religions. And interestingly, when religion is taken out of the picture, we religionize other things. Communism became a religion almost for many people. I mean, Mao became the new prophet for many Chinese people. And pop stars and rock somethings, films, they become even something people worship. So there's something in human nature which wants to devote itself to something higher than ourselves. And if traditional religions left out, sometimes it's filled by some ersatz, some artificial religions. Another point is that you're right that religion has been a reason why people conflicted throughout the history for centuries. But actually religion was gone to a great extent in the 20th century. We still kept killing each other. I mean, look at World War I, World War II, the Holocaust, Japanese imperialism in this part of the world, and then the national wars, ethnic cleansings. These happened not out of religion, they happened out of power. Nationalism became the new reason why people with each other. Therefore, I think there's something wrong and problematic about religion. I think there's something wrong with us, human beings. I mean, we cannot sit calm and smile to each other, be happy, and we have a sometimes dark side, an urge to dominate and to dictate and grasp and plunder and so on and so forth. And religions are actually supposed to tame that dark side, and they do. But sometimes they become a vehicle for that dark side. Because you conquer and you do this and say, because God told me to do so, then you have the amazing authority behind. That's why we should not allow religion to be used and misused by that dark side of ours. But I think religions will be with us. I'm saying this as a religion person myself, but also from an objective point of view, the idea that, this was a very popular idea actually. Freud said religion will go away soon. Marx predicted that, the proletariat and blah, blah, and it doesn't happen that way. I think religion is with us, here to stay. I don't know what will happen. I mean, I don't know the calculations about Buddha, but here's my intuition at this point. Of course, we will see if we long enough. But from my own worldview, I think religion is an integral part of our existence. Thank you.